Consent to suspend the quorum call.
Without objection.
Madam President, free trade is of absolute importance in this country. We need free trade. I like free trade, and I want trade to be as free as it can possibly be. It is not, however, as pressing as another matter that we should be considering now. Certain provisions of the USA Patriot Act will expire a week from Sunday at midnight. This is an important issue, and it's one that deserves debate and full consideration within the United States Senate. Now, I want to point out, Madam President, that we have had months and months to plan for this deadline, years, in fact. And during these last several months, we've worked with House members, members of the law enforcement community, members of the intelligence community, to create a compromise bill that now enjoys the support of the Attorney General of the United States, of the Director of National Intelligence, the telecom industry, the NRA, the tech community, privacy groups, and 338 members of the House of Representatives. This is a super majority, a super duper majority. We've had a week since the House passed this bill, and it's time that we took it up in earnest and give it the full attention and consideration of the Senate that it deserves. Then we can return to TPA and finish it without facing expiration of a key national security tool without anything to put in its place. This is a bill, the USA Freedom Act as enacted by the House of Representatives, represents an important compromise, represents a very careful and effective balancing between privacy and security interests, recognizing the fact that our privacy and our security are not in conflict. They are part of the same thing. We are secure in part because our privacy is respected. This bill respects both of those. Now, we know that it's not easy to get to 218 votes for a lot of things on this issue in the House of Representatives. In fact, we know it's impossible to get to 218 votes in the House of Representatives for a clean reauthorization of the Patriot Act provisions in question. We know that a lot of other things would be difficult to impossible to pass in the House. We know that one bill does enjoy a supermajority in the House of Representatives, and that is the USA Freedom Act. We should be taking that up now. And to that end, Madam President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate set aside consideration of H.R. 1314, the TPA legislation, and move to the immediate consideration of H.R. 2048, the USA Freedom Act, that the motion to proceed be agreed to, that the bill be open for amendments. Further, that upon disposition of H.R. 2048, the Senate resume consideration of H.R. 1314.
Is there objection?
Madam President.
The senator from Arkansas.
Reserving the right to object. The Patriot Act is a critical tool for our national security, and the junior senator from Utah is correct that 3 provisions do expire at the end of this month. The so-called roving wiretap provision that will allow intelligence professionals and law enforcement officials to track terrorists no matter what device they might use. The so-called lone wolf provision that would allow our intelligence authorities to identify and stop terrorists who are not necessarily clearly linked to an overseas terrorist organization. And finally, Section 215 of the Patriot Act, which has enabled our intelligence professionals at the National Security Agency to help keep our country safe in the so-called telephony metadata program, which was disclosed unlawfully by Edward Snowden 2 years ago, which is why we're able to discuss such a highly classified program. The junior senator from Utah and I disagree about the program. We disagree about the legislation. There will be a time for that debate because it is the most important thing that we could be ever debating in the United States Senate, our national security and the tools that we need to keep our country safe. But for the time being, we are on the Trade Promotion Authority bill. That was a decision made last week. It's maybe not the decision that the junior senator from Utah would have made, maybe not the decision that I would have made, but that is where we are. We could have perhaps already been done with the TPA bill if the other side of the aisle had allowed amendments to be processed last week, if there hadn't been any needless filibuster of the motion to proceed to the bill. But that's water under the bridge. We should move forward in an orderly fashion, processing the amendments that are pending on the Trade Promotion Authority bill. We should have a final vote on that bill, and then we should move on to the Patriot Act reauthorization bill. There'll be time for robust debate in public, which is exactly what so many of our members have been doing in private, given the classified nature of these programs. And if we have to work beyond Thursday, well, I'm more than happy to do that. I'll even work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday into next week if that's what's necessary to first process the trade bill and then finally to reauthorize these important provisions of the Patriot Act. Madam President, I object to unanimous consent.
Madam President. Go ahead.
Objection is heard. Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I also, no matter how any of us may vote on trade, I understand the importance of it, but I want to compliment the senator from Utah for his statement that, the fact is a great deal of work has gone into this. We have a bill, the senator from Utah's bill and my bill is the same as the one in the House. I would hope people would not lose sight of the fact that the House of Representatives really did what the American public wants. By an overwhelming bipartisan majority, they passed it. Now, some have been saying that the other body could not have gotten that kind of a vote to say the sun rises in the east. But here, they came together. And it's across the political spectrum in both parties. And I think we ought to respect that. We also, as the senator from Utah and others have said, we have a unanimous decision from the Third Circuit, which puts into question the constitutionality of the current program. We can pass the bill, the USA Freedom Act that passed in the House. It meant that both sides have given a lot to get there. We ought to pass it in this body at some point, maybe when the Trade Act and the highway bills and the other things are out, we ought to just take it up and pass it. If there are questions, once it's gone into effect, we can always come back and make other changes in it. But we ought to pass it and at least give some stability to our intelligence authorities. The head of the Director of National Intelligence, the Attorney General, they've all said they support it. And we ought to accept that. Go for it. It takes care of the questions of the courts and the issue of constitutionality, and we should do it. So, Madam President, I was saying I concur with the senator from Utah, and I would yield the floor.